the holiday spirit board. The snow fell softly that Christmas Eve, blanketing the small neighborhood in a serene silence. Yet, as the fire crackled warmly in the living room, a chill lingered that had nothing to do with the cold outside. It began with my cousin Anna, who had unearthed the Ouija board from the attic. "Look what I found," she said, her voice tinged with mischief as she brushed dust off the faded wooden surface. Her fingers traced the ornate carvings around its edges, the letters and numbers gleaming faintly under the dim light of the chandelier. "Anna," I said, half laughing but already uneasy. "You can't be serious. That thing is ancient." "That makes it perfect," she shot back. "Come on, we'll call it a family bonding activity." My aunt shook her head from the corner. "It's Christmas Eve. Let's keep things cheerful." But the suggestion had already piqued curiosity. The board ended up on the coffee table in the center of the room, surrounded by cousins and second cousins, all grinning nervously as the planchette was placed on the board. The adults, sipping mulled wine in the kitchen, pretended not to notice as we arranged ourselves in a circle. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the planchette. The firelight cast strange shadows across its surface, distorting the words, "goodbye," into something unreadable. I glanced at Anna, who was already pressing her fingertips to the wooden piece, daring me to join her. "Fine," I muttered, my voice firmer than I felt. As the others joined in, we exchanged uneasy glances. The room felt darker suddenly, the candles flickering despite the absence of a breeze. Anna's voice broke the silence, her tone light, but with a hint of challenge. "If there are any spirits here, we welcome you. Please, give us a sign." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the fire crackled loudly, sending a burst of sparks into the air. We all jumped, laughing nervously as someone joked about the timing. But then the planchette moved. At first, it was subtle, a faint twitch beneath our fingers. I locked eyes with Anna, whose grin faltered as the piece jerked again, this time with more purpose. It slid across the board, the sound of wood scraping against wood sharp in the silence. "WHO," Anna read aloud, her voice trembling. "IS." We stared, frozen, as the planchette completed its movement. "HERE." "Who's here?" my cousin Tom blurted, his voice louder than intended. The candles dimmed, their flames shrinking to faint flickers, and a sudden chill swept through the room. I wanted to pull my hands away to break the circle, but something in the air pinned me in place, a weight that pressed on my chest and made breathing shallow. The planchette moved again, faster this time. I had to fight to keep up as it spelled out a name. ELLIS. "Ellis?" I whispered, the word tasting foreign in my mouth. As the name hung in the air, the shadows in the room seemed to deepen, pooling unnaturally in the corners. The fire sputtered as though an invisible wind had swept through the house. Then, faintly, we heard it, a low, hollow laugh. It came from nowhere and everywhere at once, curling around the edges of the room and making the hair on my neck stand on end. Anna's bravado cracked. "This isn't funny. Who's doing that?" No one answered, but my pulse quickened as I glanced at the doorway leading to the darkened hallway. A shadow passed there, a fleeting, unnatural shape that vanished almost as soon as I registered it. "We should stop," I said, my voice shaking. "We should stop now." But the planchette moved once more, spelling out one final chilling word. STAY. And the board fell still. After that first session, none of us could settle. The laughter faded, replaced by a lingering unease that none of us dared to name. The name Ellis was still etched in my mind, a strange echo that seemed to cling to the shadows of the room. The adults in the kitchen had noticed the change in the atmosphere. My aunt poked her head around the corner, frowning at our pale faces. "Everything okay in here?" Anna, ever defiant, flashed her usual grin. "Just a silly game," she said, though her voice trembled at the edges. "Time for bed soon," my aunt added, but we barely heard her as she disappeared back into the kitchen. The others were already standing, eager to escape the oppressive weight that had settled over the room. I lingered, staring at the board as if it might suddenly explain itself. The firelight danced across its surface, the planchette sitting motionless in the center. "Leave it," Anna said, her tone sharper than I expected. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the stairs, her grip cold and clammy. But even in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. The house felt different. The soft creaks and groans of its old wooden frame sounded too deliberate, like the whisper of footsteps in the hall. I turned over, facing the darkened window. Snowflakes drifted lazily against the glass, but the usual calm of a winter night was absent. Instead, I felt watched, though I couldn't say why. Just as I began to drift off, I heard it. A faint knock. It came from the wall, soft but deliberate. I held my breath, waiting for it to come again, telling myself it was the pipes or the settling house. Knock, knock. This time it was closer. I sat up, the quilt clutched tightly in my fists, and glanced around the room. My sister lay sound asleep in the other bed, her face peaceful despite the growing tension in the air. Then, from the hall, I heard the soft creak of a floorboard. My heart raced as I slid out of bed, careful not to wake her. The house was dark, the kind of black that seemed to swallow light. I opened the door, peeking into the hallway. Empty. I exhaled shakily, stepping out into the cold, silent corridor. The old wooden floors groaned under my weight as I made my way toward the stairs. At the bottom, the living room was still, the embers in the fireplace glowing faintly. I was about to turn back when a sound stopped me dead in my tracks. A whisper, low and soft, like someone speaking just beneath their breath. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent a shiver down my spine. It came from the living room, near the coffee table where we'd left the Ouija board. I crept down the stairs, my pulse pounding in my ears. The closer I got, the clearer the whispers became, though I still couldn't understand them. It was as if the words weren't meant for me, as if I was eavesdropping on a conversation that shouldn't exist. When I reached the bottom, I stopped. The board was there, just as we'd left it, but the planchette wasn't. I looked around frantically, searching the dim room for any sign of movement. The shadows seemed to thicken, pooling in the corners like living things. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The planchette. It was standing upright on its edge, spinning slowly in place as though an invisible hand guided it. The whispers grew louder, filling the room with a dissonant hum that made my skin crawl. I wanted to run, to scream, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. And then, the planchette stopped. It fell flat, pointing directly at me. I don't remember climbing back up the stairs. All I know is that by the time I reached my room, I slammed the door shut and crawled into bed, pulling the blankets over my head like a child afraid of monsters. But monsters wouldn't be so quiet. The next morning, we didn't talk about what happened. I wanted to tell someone, anyone, but every time I opened my mouth, the words stuck in my throat. The others seemed just as tense, their smiles forced and fleeting. It wasn't until we were alone again in the living room that Anna broke the silence. "We need to try again." "No," I said quickly, my voice firmer than I felt. Last night was nothing," she interrupted. "It was weird, sure, but we didn't finish. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe we left something unfinished." I wanted to argue, but a part of me was curious. If there was something in the house, wouldn't it be better to confront it? We gathered around the board again, this time with a sense of dread that none of us tried to hide. As our fingers touched the planchette, the air seemed to grow colder, the light from the window dimming as though a cloud had passed over the sun. "Are you here?" Anna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the planchette moved. "Yes. "Who are you?" she continued, though her confidence was wavering. The planchette moved again, faster this time. "ELLIS. The candles flickered violently and the shadows on the walls seemed to writhe. "What do you want?" I asked, unable to stop myself. The planchette jerked erratically, spelling out a single chilling word. Home. The room seemed to hold its breath, the silence heavy and oppressive. Then from the corner, a shadow shifted. It wasn't the flicker of the candle or the play of light. It was something else, something solid, and it was watching us. The shadow in the corner didn't move like a person. It seeped, spilling over the edges of the room like ink spreading through water. Its form was shapeless yet intentional, bending the space around it until even the faint candlelight seemed to warp. We froze, barely breathing. My heart pounded in my chest as Anna whispered, "Do you see that?" None of us answered. The room was deathly silent, the only sound the faint scrape of the planchette against the board as it trembled beneath our fingers. The shadow surged forward, sudden and deliberate, and the candle nearest it snuffed out, plunging half the room into darkness. We all scrambled back, overturning chairs as the table shook violently, the Ouija board clattering to the floor. "Get it off!" Tom yelled, kicking the board away as if it had burned him. But it didn't stop. The planchette skittered across the floor on its own, carving a jagged path toward the fireplace. I followed its movement, my breath caught in my throat as it came to a sudden stop and pointed directly at the flames, now sputtering and low. "Ellis," Anna whispered, her face pale and stricken. "What do you want?" The fire roared to life, unnaturally bright and hot, the flames twisting into impossible shapes. For a brief moment I thought I saw a face in the inferno, distorted, agonized and watching us. A deafening crash shook the house, and the flames extinguished entirely, leaving us in complete darkness. "Run!" I screamed, grabbing Anna's arm and dragging her toward the hallway. The others followed, our frantic footsteps echoing against the creaking floorboards as we sprinted upstairs. We bolted into one of the bedrooms, slamming the door shut behind us. My hands shook violently as I turned the lock, pressing my back against the wood as if my weight alone could keep the shadow at bay. "What the hell is happening?" Tom whispered, his voice breaking. "It's Ellis," Anna said, her eyes wide and glassy. "He's trapped here. He told us he wanted to go home." "What does that mean?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling as she clung to Tom. "I don't know," Anna admitted. "But we didn't finish. We didn't tell him goodbye." My blood ran cold at the realization. I'd heard the warnings before. Never leave a session open. Never forget to say goodbye. And now it seemed we had broken the one unbreakable rule. As if in response, the door rattled violently, the wood groaning under an invisible force. The sound was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a low, guttural scraping, as if fingernails were clawing at the other side. Anna grabbed the Ouija board, which she had somehow brought with her in the chaos. "We have to finish it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No way," Tom said, backing away. "That thing is what started all of this. If we don't, it won't stop," Anna snapped. The room went deathly quiet again, the kind of silence that wasn't empty but full, pregnant with tension, with something waiting just out of sight. Then came the whispers, faint at first but growing louder, like dozens of voices murmuring just beyond the door. "Anna, we're sorry. We're listening now. What do you want us to do?" The planchette jerked violently under our fingers, spelling out a single word, Time. "What does that mean?" Sarah whispered. But before anyone could answer, the door slammed open, the shadow pouring into the room like a flood. It didn't lunge at us. It enveloped us, cold and suffocating, as the whispers grew deafening. The air around us froze, each breath forming clouds of vapor that vanished into the shadow's hungry depths. The candle sputtered but held, its weak flame barely keeping the darkness at bay. The planchette moved again, jerking with violent precision. D-O-O-R. "What door?" I shouted, my voice cracking as the pressure in the room grew unbearable. Anna's eyes darted around the room before landing on the closet. It stood slightly ajar, its black interior yawning like a void. "No," Sarah whimpered, clutching Tom's arm. "I'm not going in there." "We don't have a choice," Anna said, her voice resolute. With trembling hands, I pushed the closet door open. At first, it was just darkness, deep and impenetrable. But as we stared, something began to take shape. A faint, flickering light in the distance, like a candle in the void. Ellis. The name whispered through my mind, unbidden and cold. Anna stepped forward, clutching the Ouija board like a talisman. "He's waiting," she said, her voice hollow. "Anna, don't—" I started, but she was already moving. The moment she crossed the threshold, the light in the closet flared, blinding and brilliant. The rest of us stumbled back, shielding our eyes as the room filled with a deafening roar. And then, silence. When I looked up, the closet was empty, its door swinging gently on its hinges. The shadow was gone, the whispers silenced. "Anna!" I called out, my voice shaking. She didn't answer. The fire in the living room reignited on its own, casting a warm, flickering glow. The house felt different now, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. But Anna was gone. I approached the Ouija board, now lying face down on the floor. When I flipped it over, I saw a single word burned into the wood. Goodbye. The following Christmas, I avoided the house, though I still thought of Anna. Some part of me hoped she had found peace, but deep down, I knew the truth. Ellis had found his way home, and he had taken her with him.